Welcome to the Cannabis Pioneers Show at wealthresearchtube.com. I'm excited, frankly. This will be a cool interview, and the guest I have for you today is truly a revolutionary, even if he doesn't describe himself as so, because Tommy Chong is a Grammy Award-winning comedian. He's a legend for his invaluable contribution to American counter culture, which is what I'm all about. And it's, he's part of the iconic comedy duo Cheech and Chong. During their time, these two comedians recorded 6 gold comedy albums, starred in 8 films, most of which our guest has co-written and directed. And not many people know, but Tommy was born in Canada, so he's a Canadian. He recently released his new book entitled Cheech and Chong, the Unauthorized Autobiography, and it goes through all these exploits of the infamous duo, and it goes through the cannabis world. And this book serves as a follow-up to his New York Times bestseller. And you know what? They are great stories about his arrest for shipping bongs across the country, as well as his days in jail. And I just love this. Tommy, glad you're with us. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, it's fun being here. How are you? Where are you? In Israel?
I'm currently in Texas, but
in Texas. Oh,
but yeah, usually I would spend my time between North America and Europe and my home country of Israel. I spend a few months there out of the year. I know they're big with cannabis on the medicinal side, not direct.
Of course. How about what part of Texas is this? Where are you?
I'm close to Austin right now.
Yeah, of course you want to stay close to Austin if you're in Texas.
Yeah, it's a great city. Tommy, I wanted to get started and ask you this. First of all, because our audience can very much resonate and sympathize and see where you're coming from, because they're the same way. I want to ask you, why are you pushing the limits throughout life? I mean, where did this spirit, this urge originate from to just be somebody who's thinking outside the box, acting outside of the box? We don't see any full-time, full-career comedians anymore. What is it? and it's true. It's very hard to stay fresh for so many years and keep that edge. What is it that you think originated this?
Well, I'm half Chinese. My mother was Scotch-Irish, and my dad was full Cantonese, Chinese. And I always joke that the Chinese part doesn't show, and that's my brain. But I think the mixture sort of had me, sort of ready to explore anything new. And so ever since I was a kid, and actually what really got me, on the path was music, because when I was 8 years old, I found out I could play guitar good enough to back up a fiddle player that lived in the neighborhood. And so I was playing for parties and dances since I was 8, 9, 10 years old, and then eventually I ended up with my own orchestra, my own band, and because it was rock and roll, I came up in a rock and roll era where rock and roll was the outlaw music, only the devil music. And so when I started playing rock, the minute I got turned into rock and roll, I kind of got into the other side of the tracks kind of thing, the rebel. So I attribute my outlawness to rock and roll.
Interesting. And you know what? Going back and thinking about my own childhood, starting early to do anything, just entrepreneurship, it kind of sets the path going forward for this world of business and entrepreneurship, as opposed to being an employee when you have these teen urges to be an entrepreneur. I want to ask you about how hard is it to write comedy. I mean, it's got to be one of the most demanding writing activities that there is, making people laugh. It's I bet it comes naturally to you, but
yeah. Well, yeah, no, it was a natural thing. I've had this comedic streak in me ever since I can remember. You know, when I was a little guy, I used to, even before I could remember, I used to do things to make people laugh. I used to make my brother laugh, my older brother, because if I made him laugh, then he wouldn't beat on me that much. And, you know, I learned very early that if you make people laugh, then they like to be around you. You know, they like you to be around them. And so, yeah, and then when I got with the music, and I started playing with black musicians, jazz musicians, their whole world revolved around comedy. Comedy, women, comedy, and getting high, in that order.
Interesting. You know, this is the Cannabis Pioneers show, and because, as you know, state by state are legalizing cannabis, both for recreational and medicinal purposes right now. And Canada is fully legalizing by next year. Why do you think, or do you have any insights, why is the federal government taking so long? I mean, they obviously see that this is past the point of no return. There's so many people involved in the industry. Do you have any thoughts or any insights?
Sure. Sure. See, the racist laws, it's a racist law, you know, and right from the beginning, you know, especially around the turn, around the 1920s, alcohol was ruining America. It was ruining the world, you know, because there was just all sorts of bad things that happen, that come with alcohol. And so they made a prohibition on alcohol, you know, the Puritans, and they found out that when you outlaw anything, you turn it into a cash cow for gangsters and for police, because the police now, they can use the excuse of going after the bad guys for suspending civil liberties. And so when alcohol prohibition became, you know, unworkable, and they had to legalize alcohol, they had to find something else to demonize to keep that money flowing in on, you know, on the law enforcement side. Also, they needed an excuse to clamp down on people of color, you know, because remember, America was built on a racist platform right from the beginning. When Columbus discovered the New World, the first thing he did was enslave the natives and you know, and turn them into slaves. And then America itself was built on the backs of slaves, and Canada was built on the backs of Chinese indentured servants. You know, might as well be slaves. And so marijuana, what happened with marijuana, it was legal, it was a medicine, and it was ignored by the government until prohibition ended, and they needed something else. And the something else turned out to be a marijuana, because now they could demonize the Latino population, the Chicanos, which they did anyway. And the blacks. The blacks were always, you know, frowned upon and considered slaves, and Mexicans were one notch higher, maybe. Anyway, and so it formed a cash cow for the law enforcement with these forfeiture laws, you know, which Jeff Sessions wants to enact again, you know, bring back. You know, where you can arrest someone and take all their belongings without charging them with a crime. You know, just go in and, just take their money and their drugs. And when I got arrested, the SWAT team came in my house, and they weren't really looking for drugs. They were looking for guns and drugs and money. They were looking for more for money than anything else, because when they arrested any kind of dealers, the first thing they would do is grab the money. Now, in the beginning, They used to turn the money in, and then it would go to courts, and then the courts would take it and say, give it to the police. Then toward the end of marijuana prohibition, the cops, the DEA themselves, would take the money themselves. You saw that movie Training Day. That was a good example of it, with Denzel Washington.
I saw Boardwalk Vampires, and I really understood how this all is a well-oiled machine that works in favor of everyone who's on the inside. Absolutely, and don't forget, this money that they take is really cash, is tax-free. It's not considered income; it's considered forfeiture. And so the cops can, buy their cars and their weapons and pay salaries and everything else, and not have to worry about taxing, any money going toward the government. And basically, what you're saying is, on the state level, it's legal. They're gonna tax the gains. They're gonna legally tax the gains. On the federal level, they're gonna create their own. They want to keep stealing. They want to keep stealing, and not only that, but don't forget, when they legalize marijuana across the board, we won't need the DEA. The opioid crisis, for instance, you don't need a DEA for opioids. What you need is like the FBI or some federal agency cracking down on pharmaceutical companies and that are making and selling the drugs that are killing people now. And so when they legalize marijuana, there's going to be no need for the Drug Enforcement Agency. They're obsolete, and so those guys they're like dinosaurs, being sucked into the mud, and they're dying, and so as they're lashing out now, and there's nothing they can do about it except get into the marijuana business themselves. There are a lot of ex-DEA agents, ex-lawyers and judges and prosecutors that are in the marijuana business right now, because they know what a cash cow that business really is. Interesting. Now, before the interview, I Googled your net worth, which any listener can do. And it may be inaccurate, but in the grand scheme of things, you've done well for yourself and for your family. And it goes to show that one can do a very difficult, mentally, physically hard job, like performing, like standing up. Your voice obviously has... you're sweating on stage. This is a hard work, and still throughout your life use cannabis. In fact, I've heard it's helpful. Can you please describe, for most people listening to this have never tried marijuana, can you describe the effect it has on your body, on your mind, and basically why you are a big fan of this? Well, a couple of reasons. Number one, I found out that I got into bodybuilding, weightlifting. And one thing I found out about the weightlifters, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and they're all friends of mine. And I started working out in the same gym with Arnold. And Arnold was such a purist and such a health addict that he would not touch liquor. He would not touch, back in the day. The only substance that he would use was marijuana. It was the only substance that he would put in his body. And I also talked to another guy, Zabel Kazuski. He used to win all the body part things. And he was like a legend. And same as him. The only trouble is Zabel ended up with an alcohol problem. But he still worked out. He worked out every day until he died. He was 83 when he died, and he had a 32-inch waist, and he still had 16-inch arms, even more, 17, 18-inch arms, and he was still in the most fabulous shape you could possibly be in. And so I realized that real early that marijuana, what it does, it activates the creative part of your brain. It affects the brain, and that's why it really messes people up, because it goes right to the brain, where the alcohol, it affects your nervous system.
And so what happens with alcohol is you can die from alcohol because you lose your reasoning powers. That's why people are drunk driving are, so dangerous, because you lose your powers to compute or to reasonably work your way out of problems. On the other hand, marijuana sharpens your senses, including your sleeping senses. When you smoke too much marijuana, you're more apt to fall asleep than anything else, than to hurt anybody, for sure, including yourself. In fact, you become very cautious when you've ingested too much marijuana. Now, what I've done all my life is that I've been very, I smoke very small amounts. I take very, and then I go periods of time where I don't smoke anything. For like when I was in jail, there was a 3-year period of my life where I never smoked one joint. I never had one bit of THC in my body for 3 years, and I had no bad effects from it, no withdrawal, no nothing, urges, no urges, nothing, because like I say, what marijuana does, it sharpens the brain. And so a lot of people, they get confused, like time, all of a sudden, they get high for the first time and they'll find themselves sitting, in one position for hours, or looking at their hand, or reading the same page of the book over and over again, or listening to the music and then hearing something that they never heard before. So when it affects the brain like that, and you're aware of it, and you know how to use it, then it becomes medical, and then you use it as a medicine. When you're feeling down, like when I had a cancer operation, I started losing weight, scary. I went under 145 pounds. And to me, I was usually around 170, and I lost all that weight. And then I started smoking marijuana again, and that gave me back my appetite. And because that's what the munchies aren't anything bad. The munchies, what it does, it sharpens your brain, and your brain knows what your body needs. And that's and more than anything, your body needs water. That's why you always get cotton mouth. And that's why that's why the humans eat salt, by the way. Salt is only ingested by humans in order for them to drink more water, because humans don't drink enough water. And marijuana, when you get cottonmouth, then you get a craving for water. Not booze, not anything else, but water. Just nice, ice cold, delicious water. And so what happens with me, and that's what happened with me, is that it sharpened my creative mind. And so that I went from playing guitar to performing comedy on stage, and then acting, and then directing and writing movies. I'd never even thought of going to film school, but I've directed almost 6-7 movies, and a couple were like major hits. And to do that, it's tough. There's been people in the movie industry all their lives and has never achieved the success that I achieved. And this is without any schooling. This is without any kind of formal training. And so I did that with music. I did that with writing. I had 2 books out. I did that with my movie career, with acting, and then I got a part in that '70s show. And where again, I was in a hit television show for years, and the same thing applied. It was that I had the ability to learn, and see, this is what marijuana will do for you. Now, a lot of people, they say kids shouldn't do it because blah blah blah. They have all that thing, because of the young mind and all that. Well, that's all propaganda. That is something, because what marijuana does, it makes the person realize that they are an individual. Not just an individual, but a very special individual. And that's what's needed in this world, because so many people they don't feel good unless they join a club, or they're part of a group, or part of a tribe, or part of a gang, or belong to some club. But the thing is, with marijuana, you smoke marijuana, you realize that you don't need anybody but yourself, and that's the most important thing.
That's interesting. That's very, very interesting. In fact, Tommy, I appreciate the time you've taken to explain all this to us, and I have so many more questions to us. I hope you can do a follow-up interview with us very soon. And I'd love to catch up with you and what you're doing these days, and let people know. And I'd like to get your thoughts of what you think is next for the U.S. cannabis industry, and just on the political front as well. And hopefully you can get around to doing this. What is your website for people who are looking to check what you're doing today?
Well, Tommy Chong. Just Google Tommy Chong. You'll find me. I'm all over the website, and or Cheech and Chong, but Tommy Chong. That's how you'll find me. And I'll be glad. I'll be available to you anytime you want me on your show. I'll be glad to get on.
Tommy Chong, thank you very much for doing this, sir.